All right, what's going on? Good morning. Good morning. Got a little under 6 minutes until bell open. Just paying attention to Nasdaq right now. Um, so far this morning, nothing really been happening. Just been consolidating for the most part. Um, let's see. So we got all-time highs right here. We can start from the top down. So we got all-time highs right here. Market has been bullish so far this week with everything going on with the U.S. and Iran and all the missiles and all that. So playing it careful today. We do have 4 hour fair value gap right here that we could. I would potentially like to see price go down here and get a retracement or like a Judah swing before reversing to go for these highs. I am bullish, but with everything going on, anything is bound to happen. So we do have Redfield the news. We have the Fed Powell testifying at 10 a.m. So we're gonna watch the opening range, which is the first 30 minutes after bell open. So from 9:30 to 10, we're gonna see what happens. We also have a fair value gap, that 15-minute fair value gap we've been respecting here. Also place the SMT at these lows. Um, so yeah, we're just waiting to see what happens here. We do have this 5-minute SIBI right here. Let's see if we can get above that. But like I said, we do have these equal lows right here. So anything can happen. So we're just being patient this morning, seeing what the market wants to do. Let's see how big the opening range gap is, and we can go from there. All right, we got about 15 seconds until market opens. So let's see how we open up. All right, so we got the same open at 8:30 to 9:30. Let's see if the opening range gap. So find the opening range gap, you just switch over to regular trading hours and you'll see this big gap. I mark it out with a rectangle. You go from the close to the opening price. Drag it over a little bit. And there you have it. That's our opening range gap. So we have a big opening range gap down. So I would like to see if we can hit consequent encroachment of that, which if you don't know, consequent encroachment means the 50% mark or halfway mark of a gap. So this gap is, we have over 200 point opening range gap, which is very big. So I don't expect to see it fully closed in, but I would like to see if we can make it at least to consequent encroachment, which also so happens to be below this 4 hour fair value gap high. Let's see what ES did on open. All right, so we took out this low. My bad, my mouth's all loud. I gotta get another one. So nothing really crazy. I'm expecting to see all the like the move of the day for the AM session happen at 10 o'clock or after 10 a.m. because that's when we have, let's see right here, we got the Fed Chair Powell testifying at 10 o'clock. So see if that brings any excitement to the market. Yeah, so far, just boring. Nothing's really happening as of right now. So far after open, we have took in a low, short-term low, short-term high. All right, so new highs have been put in. Still, nothing meaningful going on yet. Just consolidating. So now that we've taken out this high right here, let's see if we get any reaction to it. So since the bell opening, we have yet to put we still have not have a first fair value gap. First presented fair value gap. I'm stuttering. No fair value gap has been put in yet, so nothing really to go off of. But a new high has been taken, so let's see if we get a bearish reaction. On ES, we do have a first fair value gap right here.
It's making it, yes, even more.
All right. ES just took this high. Let's see what happens after here. If price wants to go higher or see what we want to do. Being real patient this morning. So considering that we have such a huge opening range gap below us, we have all-time highs above us. We have the Fed care speaking at 10. We've been consolidating all morning in pre-market. Last Asia session was super, 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 super bullish. Like we just opened at 6 o'clock and never looked back. Just kept pushing higher and higher and higher. So, and then for London session, we had a bullish run, then a bearish run, and then just been consolidating ever since. All right, so we have this is more defined fair value gap. Let's see if this can turn into a inversion fair value gap. And Q also I didn't realize we did have the we do have our first presented fair value gap right here. Along with an order block, but not jumping the gun on anything. Um, well, in the meantime, I do want to see what oil and gold is doing. Alright, so go to super bears. So it's all right. We just had a move down. Um, so in order to look for lower prices, I would want to see a close below the first presented fair value gap for NQ. For ES, we already have a close below these two BISIs, or buy side imbalance, sell side inefficiency, as well as a market structure shift. So now from here on out, I'll just be watching to see if we start to get bearish price action from here on out. So let's see what NQ wants to do with this first presented fair value gap. And a little under 9 minutes, we have the Fed chair speaking. So we still have that ahead of us. And our bearish target would be consequent encroachment of the opening range gap and this 4-hour fair value gap high if we're shorting. All right, so we have ES respecting this fair value gap so far. I want to see this top half remain open. All right, and we got to close below the first presented fair value gap. You'll see, I'll take a small position here.
Order filled. Order filled.
And we're going to have a stop loss at the high, and our target is going to be consequent encroachment right here, and we have this low here as well. So now let's watch and see if ES can get a close below the ES first presented fair value gap. So we're going low risk, only because of all the uncertainties behind everything with the market right now, and also with the Fed about to speak within the next just above 5 minutes. All right, so ES closed below the first presented fair value gap. Let's see if we can maintain this. Doesn't look too promising, but we're getting closes below. This price is real slow right now. You'll see what happens at 10 o'clock. All right, so it looks like NQ is the weaker pair among the two this morning. We have ES dropping lower, NQ a little slow to do so. We're hanging around in this first presented fair value gap, and we're getting that price jump because we're getting close to 10 o'clock. All right, so we still managed to close inside the first presented fair value gap. We'll see if that holds or not. ES still making lower prices. Yeah, I meant to do this too. Let's see what the opening range gap for. All right, we have about a minute left until 10 a.m. and the Fed starts speaking. That usually brings either it does one of two things, right? It either gonna bring volatility to the market, or it usually just creates a heavy chop for the remainder of the session. So we're gonna see what we do. It is looking like bearish price action, looking kind of good right now, even though it's sloppy. We have ES just check out these lows. We can delete this, honestly. So we have ES just check out these lows. So I want to see. I want to see speed after these lows, but it looks like we're getting a reaction. If we don't start displacing below these lows at 10 o'clock, then that's not going to be good for the setup. Let's see if we can get that speed below here. All right, 10 o'clock. Let's see what happens. All right, doesn't look too good. We're starting to fade after taking these lows.
Order filled.
So if I would have had a full size position on, seeing price action right now, I would close out some of my position to minimize risk, because I'm not liking how ES took this low and we didn't displace below it. But since we only got in with 2 micros, it is what it is. I'm fine with this risk. So ES has a retest of this first presented fair value gap with a reaction. So we will see if that can be sustained. I really, really, really need to see this placement below this low to be comfortable holding shorts. NQ is yet to take the low. We have equal lows right here. Right, we're not getting that speed, so like I'm not too confident in this trade anymore. It's looking like it's just gonna be a consolidation session. We'll see what the 10 o'clock macro closes off at. We also have dollar making lower prices as well, which isn't good for just for shorting opportunities.
National. And just everything that the markets are seeing and trying to suffer to. I know I'm contacted all the time by businesses in my district, manufacturing businesses that can't even start thinking about investing with the level of chaos just from the tariff policy alone. Anyway, there's a long set of things we should be talking about, and I'm happy to save some people some time, and let's get to it. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize the Chairman of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity, Mr. Lucas, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's hearing will allow us to evaluate the state of the economy and review the FOMC's policy decisions. It's appropriate to regularly take a step back and assess the central bank's performance and its responsiveness to the economic conditions our constituents face back home. This hearing is particularly timely conversation as the Fed wraps up its 5-year framework review, including a thorough look at the consensus statement, communication strategy, and other guiding policies that will have a profound effect on the lives of every American. Many of these topics we'll discuss today we've taken a closer look at in the Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity Task Force. I look forward to building on these conversations here. One issue that I think warrants special attention is the binding nature of the SLR and ESLR on the Treasury market intermediation. I'm glad to see the Fed is looking into this tomorrow, and I hope we'll see meaningful action soon. Chairman Powell, thank you for being here. It's critically important that Congress and the central bank have an open dialogue. Transparency, accountability, honest communications are pillars of our system's success. I look forward to your testimony on the state of the economy and the Fed's plans for the future. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. I recognize the ranking member of the Task Force on Monetary Policy, Treasury Market Resilience, and Economic Prosperity, Mr. Vargas, for 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and thank you, Chairman Powell, both for your years of public service and for being here today. Since 1977, the Fed has been tasked by Congress with its dual mandate goals of achieving both maximum employment and stable prices. Unfortunately, this administration has made accomplishing these goals more difficult. In the Fed's most recent summary of economic projections, we see a forecast for slower growth, stickier inflation, and rising unemployment, all of which point to a potential stagflation scenario. Whether it's the president's indecision on trade policy, his hiring freezes impacting the collection of economic data, his ballooning of the deficit to cut taxes for the wealthy, or his name-calling, all of these actions make it tougher for the Fed to do its job. I look forward to your testimony today, Mr. Powell, Chairman Powell, and I yield back with that.
Gentleman yields back. Today, we do welcome the testimony of the Honorable Jerome Powell, Chair of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. Chairman Powell, we thank you for taking time to be with us. You'll be recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your written testimony, and without objection, your written testimony will be made part of the record. You're now recognized for 5 minutes. Mike.
Thank you, Chairman Hill, Ranking Member, and other members of the committee. It's great to be back here today. I appreciate the opportunity to present the Federal Reserve's semi-annual monetary policy report. The Federal Reserve remains squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Despite elevated uncertainty, the economy is in a solid position. The unemployment rate remains low, and the labor market is at or near maximum employment. Inflation has come down a great deal, but has been running somewhat above our 2% longer-run objective. We are attentive to the risks on both sides of our dual mandate. I will review the current economic situation before turning to monetary policy. Incoming data suggests that the economy remains solid. Following growth of 2.5% last year, GDP was reported to have edged down in the first quarter, reflecting swings in net exports that were driven by businesses bringing in imports ahead of potential tariffs. This unusual swing has complicated GDP measurement. Private domestic final purchases, or PDFP, which excludes net exports, inventory investment, and government spending, grew at a solid 2.5% rate. Within PDFP, growth of consumer spending moderated, while investment in equipment and intangibles rebounded from weakness in the fourth quarter. Surveys of households and businesses, however, report a decline in sentiment in recent months and elevated uncertainty about the economic outlook, largely reflecting trade policy concerns. It remains to be seen how these developments might affect future spending and investment. In the labor market, conditions have remained solid. Payroll job gains averaged a moderate 224,000 per month in the first 5 months of the year. The unemployment rate at 4.2% in May remains low and has stayed in a narrow range for the past year. Wage growth has continued to moderate while still outpacing inflation. Overall, a wide set of indicators suggests that conditions in the labor market are broadly in balance and consistent with maximum employment. The labor market is not a source of significant inflationary pressures. The strong labor market conditions in recent years have helped narrow long-standing disparities in employment and earnings across demographic groups. Inflation has eased significantly from its highs in mid-2022, but remains somewhat elevated relative to our 2% longer-run goal. Estimates based on the Consumer Price Index and other data indicate that total personal consumption expenditures, or PCE prices, rose 2.3% over the 12 months ending in.
All right, just an update. That was the Fed Chair, Jerome Powell, speaking. But I just muted it real quick just to talk about price action really quick. So we do have a small fair value gap right here. And then we have a drop, making another lower low, but it's not displacing as fast as much as I would like it to. We still have all these relative equal lows right here. I do want to see this get swept and then see what reaction we get after that. But prices is very slow, not doing much, and it doesn't help that the dollar is also going low, because when we're bearish, we would like to see dollar be bullish. So that's not helping our case at all. So I'm not, this trade is still like, it's not really looking the best. But like I said, if we were in a full size position, I definitely would scale back to minimize risk, but we're already in super light, so doesn't really matter per se. But that is my standing on what's going on at the present moment. I'm about to unmute the Fed chair speaking, so you can just pay attention.
Economic activity. The effects on inflation could be short-lived, reflecting a one-time shift in the price level. It's also possible that the inflationary effects could instead be more persistent. Avoiding that would depend on the size of the tariff effects, on how long it takes for them to pass through fully into prices, and ultimately on keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Our obligation is to keep longer-term inflation expectations well anchored and to prevent a one-time increase in the price level from becoming an ongoing inflation problem. As we act to meet that obligation, we will balance our maximum employment and price stability mandates, keeping in mind that without price stability, we cannot achieve the long periods of strong labor market conditions that benefit all Americans. For the time being, we are well positioned to wait to learn more about the likely course of the economy before considering any adjustments to our policy stance. To conclude, we understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll now turn to member questions. I recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. Over the past few weeks, our Democratic colleagues have suggested the following: after the initial release of the GDP report, the president is driving the economy into a recession. Chairman Powell, the latest FOMC statement described economic activity had to continue to expand at a solid pace, and you just reiterated that in your testimony this morning. In your view, is the term recession and the economy growing at a solid pace, are those synonymous with each other?
I would say no.
And you note that the labor market continues strong, the economy's at a standard pace, and you also referenced in your testimony that that first quarter GDP initial react was also from front-end loading, as you noted, imports to try to avoid tariff impacts. Also, I looked at the Atlanta Fed GDP Now model, which forecasts GDP growth for the second quarter of this year at nearly 4%, with core GDP forecast at 2%. Does that Atlanta model suggest a recession to you?
No, I would say it doesn't.
So in looking at your remarks about tariffs today and then the ones that you made during March and April, I was looking back at a Fed study that noted that up until March, tariffs have already been partially passed through in consumer prices, leading to a contribution of merely 1/10 percentage point increase in core PCE prices. And a Harvard study last week showed that prices have only modestly adjusted since the announcement of tariffs. Finally, the longer-term inflation expectations remain consistent with the 2% goal. Governor Waller laid out a pathway that allows for rate cuts provided that average effective tariff rates remain close to 10%, or I assume he means 10% or lower. The labor market remains solid, prices continue to disinflate. So given that data I've outlined, I'm sure data that you're very familiar with, for the economy to avoid persistent inflation, do you concur with Governor Waller that there is a pathway for good news as it relates to the regulatory policies, the tax policies that I've discussed, in a world with lower tariff rates?
So first, I wouldn't comment on any other FOMC members' comments one way or the other, but I will say this. I think many paths are possible here, and certainly the one you mentioned is a possible one. We could see inflation come in not as strong as we expect, and if that were the case, that would tend to suggest cutting sooner. We could see the labor market weakening, and that would also suggest cutting sooner. On the other hand, if we see inflation coming in higher, or if the labor market were to remain strong, then we would probably be moving later. So I think a range of possible paths are possible, and certainly the one you mentioned is one of them.
In February of 2021, you told us in this committee that you would stay in your lane and not comment on President Biden's proposal for the American Rescue Plan or sharply increasing federal spending. And, you know, you said it was an issue, but that you would stay in your lane and not comment on it. But here in this year, you have commented on this idea of tariffs being set by the executive branch. So are tariffs in your lane, but a huge fiscal spending by the Biden administration not in your lane? Explain to the committee why you chose to be silent in February of 21, but outspoken this spring.
Sure. So we haven't commented, and it would be inappropriate for us to comment on the policy of tariffs. We don't have a view. It's not our job, and we just wouldn't do that. And just as we wouldn't comment on the reconciliation package that you're working on right now. We're not commenting on tariffs. What our job is inflation, keeping inflation under control, and also keeping maximum employment. And when policies have what appear to be short and medium-term implications, meaningful implications for that, then they kind of, not the policies themselves, but the inflation becomes our job.
Yeah. You know my views on price stability. I think it's a first among equals in your dual mandate. I've argued for that. I've introduced legislation to make the dual mandate the sole mandate, and we've talked about that before. But I was very curious about your thoughts on former president of the Cleveland Bank, Loretta Mester's quote that I read from last fall. She says, "I think that maximum employment is the maximum level of employment consistent with price stability." In other words, she elegantly ties that together, that price stability is what you can have more control over rather than, you know, all these other factors that enter the employment picture like legislative and executive branch. What's your thought about her quote?
I personally think that's a very reasonable way to think about it.
Thank you very much. I yield back. The gentleman from New York is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Chair Powell, and thank you for being here. Last week, the FOMC decided to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 4.25% to 4.5%. While I was not surprised by the decision to hold rates steady, I was surprised by the committee's revised forecast since March, which represented a decrease of 0.3 percentage points for GDP, a similar increase for core PCE, and an uptick in the unemployment rate to 4.5%. Can you explain the incoming data that the committee has seen since March that caused it to make these adjustments?
Sure. So first of all, these are individual. This is not a committee forecast. These are just individuals submitting their own personal forecasts, and we don't bless those as a committee. But I think people are looking at the incoming data and having a range of different judgments. If you look at the range, if you look at the central tendency, you'll see that it covers quite a wide range. Those are the medians that you're talking about. I think so. Inflation is projected to have moved up because of what we've seen, particularly from tariffs. And I think if you look at other outside forecasters, you'll see very much the same thing.
And what data are you looking for?
Well, we look at the incoming data on. We look at our own forecast and we ask ourselves what's likely to happen. You know, monetary policy has to be forward-looking. A forecast is a prediction of what's going to happen in the future.
Thank you. In its statement, the committee announced that it will continue to monitor the implications of incoming data and adjust the stand of monetary policy as appropriate. Some analysts predict 2 rate cuts by the end of the year are still on the table. Is this a fair and accurate assumption? And what incoming data will the committee need to see to consider these cuts?
So what will actually happen with rates is going to depend on the path of the economy, and that's highly uncertain. So I would just say what that means at this moment in time is that a significant majority of the committee, but also there's a pretty significant minority that doesn't agree, but a significant majority feels it will be appropriate to reduce rates later this year. And what that means is that each of those persons who wrote down a cut in rates later this year They think that there's some state of the world where inflation doesn't prove to be as high, or the labor market weakens, or some combination of those two things, that it will turn out to be more likely than not appropriate to reduce policy rates, subject to great uncertainty. I mean, we will, the story has been evolving, and our thinking has been adapting, and that will continue.
Thank you. Chair Powell, although a ceasefire has been tentatively reached in the Middle East, the situation still has the potential to open global and energy markets, especially if the ceasefire is broken. While at this point, Iran is seen as unlikely to close the Strait of Hormuz, that decision could change. How is the Fed assessing the current situation and incorporating those assessments as it considers future adjustment to economic projections and its stand on monetary policy?
So I think it's too early to.
All right, just to take a break and come back. I am about to close this position. And we go here.
Order filled.
All right, we're gonna close this position early. I'm closing because we're getting closes above the first presented fair value gap. We're not staying below it. We didn't respect this fair value gap right here. We didn't get speed below this low, so there's really no point of me holding it. And also, dollar is tanking right now, which you never want to see when you're going short. So those are my reasons for closing this trade early and preserving risk. So from here on out, we're going to watch price action, see if it wants to clear up or not. If it's just going to be like this for the rest of the session, then I'll just do a beginner lesson. But I'll give it until 11:30. Nothing meaningful happens after the 11 o'clock macro, which ends at 11:10. Then I'm probably going to take a step back, come back during the PM session and see if anything happens during the PM session that's meaningful. But right now, price is just stuck. Just been consolidating. Nothing's really going on, so.
Implications for the economy will be. This is no different than any set of policy changes at the beginning of the administration. However, December 18 of 2024 at the FOMC press conference, you noted, and I'm paraphrasing, that some Federal Reserve officials began to incorporate preliminary conditional estimates of how fiscal policies might impact the economy into their forecasts. This seems inconsistent, and I sidebarred with the chair to say, okay, did I hear this correctly, his question and sort of your answer? What I heard is that there was a belief that the IRA would not be inflationary, but that tariffs could be. Therefore, suddenly you and others were commenting on tariffs. And for the institution, I know you try to be consensus driven. Why are there FOMC participants making fiscal policy assumptions into their forecasting when you yourself said that fiscal policies need to be articulated before the FOMC can make a plausible assessment into their implications, what those will be? And I think if there's different participants having different assumptions, that would render the SEP, Summary of Economic Projections, biased, meaningless, useless, less impactful, and when you're not comparing apples to apples. So wouldn't it make more sense for all the forecasters to make the same fiscal policy assumptions at the same time? Or if not, shouldn't each participant disclose what assumptions that they're using and building into that? So here's the question.
So that's a great question. That really, when the Summary of Economic Projections was originally designed and put into effect in this way, the way it works is that individuals are free to make whatever assumptions they want, and they do disclose them. They disclose them in their speeches and things like that. So there will be situations where some people incorporate something and others don't. And we, we try to be transparent about that. But that's kind of the way it works. When I say we don't take it into account, I'm really talking about policy and the committee as a whole, where we won't take things into account until we know.
And you believe that the participants disclose their assumptions when they're doing their forecasts?
Well, I think they do that in their speeches. Each people go out, you may have noticed there are a lot of speeches.
Well,
And
I guess the opaqueness of the Fed has been something over the arc of my 15 years on this committee has been one that has been debated greatly, including auditing the Fed and a number of other things that have gone on. I've got here a brief moment. I do feel like I need to touch on interest rates. Not to be a shock, you asked how the family business was doing back in Michigan. Families involved in sand and gravel and aggregates and construction and things like that. It's been strong. We need more labor. We need a few other things on that, what's happening. But I mean, I think there's no recession. That's been established. There's no hyperinflation, or certainly not as what some had been projecting. Yet there seems to be higher than expected or certainly desired interest rates for many of us. And I'm curious how high interest rates, they hurt Americans who are paying car loans, credit cards, mortgages. Just this morning, you had FHFA Director Pulte asking for lower interest rates, which would obviously impact home buyers as well. So what is it that's keeping, in your mind, the Fed from what many of us believe is the right thing to do, which is to lower some interest rates, and by the way, match what the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Swiss Central Bank, a number of emerging central banks. By the way, that's your own assessment on page 33 as where you're laying that out. Why aren't we doing what the rest of the world is doing? Is it because we're at full employment? Is it because of those tariffs concerns that you said weren't part of the analysis? Was it energy, groceries, durable goods? Why?
So you're right that if you just look in the rearview mirror and look at the existing data that we've seen, you can make a good argument that that would call for us to be at a neutral level, which would be, a couple of cuts or maybe more kind of thing. The reason we're not is the forecast by all professional forecasters that I know of on the outside and the Fed do expect a meaningful increase in inflation over the course of this year. When I said we weren't going to talk about tariffs and inflation, that was to say until we see what the policies are. And so now we know a lot more. It's 6 months since I said that. So anyway, I'd be happy to continue this with you.
Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Ms. Tlaib is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Chair Powell, last month there was research published in the Journal of Urban Health that found that more than half of Black women of reproductive age, that's the term they use, in the counties that I represent, that had experienced some sort of eviction during their lifetime. So that's like 50% of Black women in the two largest counties, Wayne County and Oakland County in Michigan. And these numbers are horrific. As you know, were you aware of that?
No.
All right, they're just yapping. Nothing's going on in the market. So with that being said, in the meantime, we can just talk about what lesson do I want to get right now? Should I do a beginner? Give me a second. All right. Well, while that's going on, we can talk about what is my favorite model. So there's a lot of models that I use, but however, out of all the ones that I know, the best one to me that gives the most quick, easy A+ setups is a lot of people call it their own model. It's an ICT ICT, basically an ICT turtle soup model, but as Justin would say, it's his ATM model, or Charmaine would say it's his model. Regardless, it's a very great model. So how it is, right? Let me see. We gotta get, what is it? I always forget because I don't really use these like that. All right, yeah, path. So say the market is trading, right? Making higher highs, right? And the higher lows. This is how the market likes to move, right? So from here on out, right, we can see that we have sell side right here, right? So as the market is moving, let's say we have a fair value gap right here, and we just swept this high. So we swept this high, failed to make another high, made a lower low, have a fair value gap. This is the sell side. We're on the sell side model of things, and we're taking this fair value gap to go lower. Where's it at? Here. Right. Boom. We get the reaction, and we take out sell side. Maybe consolidate for a little bit. So from here, now we took out opposing sell side, well, opposing liquidity, which would be sell side. We have buy side right here. Right. So now we take it out, and in the midst of this, we look for a fair value gap, an inversion fair value gap, a breaker, any PD array that you like the best. Me personally, I like fair value gaps and inversion fair value gaps the best. So in this situation, this is the leg that took out, this is the last manipulation leg that took out sell side. So I would look for a SIBI, which is sell side imbalance, buy side inefficiency. So then come my inversion fair value gap, and wait for a retest and enter along. Boom. From here, we should start seeing internal price action start to follow bullish PD arrays, and essentially hit buy side. So basically, what you want to wait for is for a pool of liquidity, a major pool of liquidity to be swept, which in this situation was sell side. We had equal highs at the top. We had an inversion fair value gap on the last manipulation leg that swept sell side. We got in and just watch bullish price action form until we hit opposing liquidity, which was this buy side. So this is the model that I like to use the best. This is like let me look at the market real quick. Make sure I'm not missing anything. Nah, I can see it. If you were wondering, NQ is still consolidating. It still hasn't took out a high or a low. It's just doing nothing. Alright, we can delete all of this. That's a model. If you want to screenshot it, you can go back and screenshot it. I'll leave this up here so you can go back and rewind it yourself. But that's the model that I like to use. Here's the current market. Nothing going on. As you can see, this is the model that I was trying to use for today's session. But usually when we have Fed chair speaking, it's either super volatile or super just nothing, just consolidating. And today was one of them consolidation speeches. So the model was us taking this high, breaking down lower. This is the last manipulation leg up. We didn't get inversion fair value gap, but we have the first presented fair value gap. And then as y'all guys saw earlier, once we was closing below, I took an entry on it. We was in profit a little bit, but we failed to take out these equal lows. So and then y'all saw I closed out early once we started closing above the first presented fair value gap, because the market isn't just doing anything. So now we just wait. And honestly, we're approaching 11 o'clock. I'm really not seeing anything interesting. I might just come back during the PM session to see if we can find a setup then. Yeah, I think that's gonna be it. If I'm gonna end it now because this is kind of boring. Nothing's really going on. I don't like just watching consolidation. If anything, I'll still be watching. If anything happens, I'll record it and make a video from that. From that, but as of right now, that would be the end of the live. I was hoping for some more interesting price action, but today was kind of boring. So it is what it is. Not every day is gonna be the best, but we'll see what happens in the PM session at 1:30. So on that note, I'll catch y'all later.